Okay. So, and I'm gonna do is open up VisualVM. And I already have a configuration here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna remove that. Now, first off, in order to really use VisualVM for what I'm going to show you, you've got to go in, once you've installed VisualVM, go to Tools, Plugins, and you want to install the VisualVM MBeans plugin, which will allow you to pull the MBean variables from the remote host. So I already have that installed, so that's fine. And I'm going to come in JMX, then now, let's look at the actual configuration here for the VDB Advanced. I have a JMX port defined. I have a JMX host name. This is important because of the way the protocol works. This name must resolve to the proxy that you're trying to connect to with VisualVM. Otherwise, things aren't going to work. And then you set up username and password. Okay. So with that enabled, then you would want to restart the proxy. If you have not done that before, then you can come in. I'm going to do demo A, port 1099, security admin, the password, save credentials, do not require SSL. Okay. And I now have a connection to my proxy. I'm going to open it up. And this gives you a bunch of different things. You can look at like the heap space, how much memory is used, etc. So there's a bunch of built-in things for tracking how the JVM is working. You can look at all the threads that are executing. Okay, how much CPU time they are taking, etc. Okay, so this is very useful for tracking. If they're out of control threads, you can figure out what they are, what they're doing. You can say, come in, select thread, and you can do a thread dump if you want. And it shows you the threads that are executing, where in the code they are, etc. Okay.
How does the JMX support multiple proxies, say in an autoscaling group?
You would have to point to an individual proxy.
Okay.
Okay. So that is a limitation. I mean, and the way that it works, it really is not designed to, well, let me explain how it was intended. It was intended that you could connect to, say, one node, and then that one node could redirect you to another node. And that's why that host name is important, because it'll connect, ask, where should I actually connect to? And then it'll connect to it. Okay, it's kind of weird how it operates, and most protocol, it's kind of taking an archaic view of how protocols are supposed to work from a long time ago. Now, once you're in, though, you can get like the MBeans. So this is a global set of variables that you can look at. Okay. So there's a lot of different counters. If you refresh, you can see that the values just keep working. Okay. There's some JVM metrics that we add in. This is dealing with like memory allocation rates and such. We then have connection pool statistics. So let's kind of close that out. You can see what the actual URL is that it's connecting to for each pool. So if you look, you can see that that's a read-only false. read only equals true, read only equals false based on the URL, etc. Okay. But you can also look at how many times a connection has been borrowed, how many have been created, how many have been released. So the difference between those two should be how many idle or active connections there are in general. So you can see that right here, the difference is 6 and idle is 6. If you refresh, you can see, okay, we've got an active of 1 right now. So you can see, in general, not many are opening, and that's the value of the connection pool. You can then come in, look at the connection pool, and this is for each data source. So you see reader. Okay, you see writer. Let's look at writer. Okay, and server name. And you can see statistics for that data source as well. Okay.
How is cache hit rate relevant on the data source?
Honestly, it may not be relevant at all.
Okay.
Okay. Let's actually see. Sorry, that's flagged under none because it did not go against the server. Okay. Now you'll notice that it's refreshing. These values are refreshing on a per minute basis. So, basically these numbers, whenever, you know how when our log, we have per minute statistics for each proxy.
Right.
When it generates that, it resets these numbers. Okay. So if you look here, you see the current and the count. Okay. This is a reset value every minute. And this is an absolute number.
Okay.
Since it was actually reset. Okay. So that current should refresh every minute.
So that covers cache hits and the connection pooling. Is there any metric related to read, write, split, or usage of the replicas?
So you could look at proxy query count versus the forward count. Okay, the forward count is how many went to the read replicas. They got forwarded.
Okay.
Okay. Now, keep in mind that number is going to be very low because if we come back over here, caching, let's look at the dashboard. Okay. Reasonably speaking, there aren't going to be that many queries that get forwarded. But if we come in and we turn off caching, commit, you can come back over here. Let's look at that forward count. You can see we're getting a lot forwarded now. Now, if, however, you had concurrency configured,
yes,
to limit how many, then you could actually compute that, or you could get it from there. Okay. So if you created a concurrency counter, in fact, I have not tested this. Let me try. Add tag. One is executing at that moment.
Okay, and for the counters that are periodically flushed out as part of the every minute statistics, what is the description in the log that captures those metrics?
That's just like the console log information.
So they're not written to the logs?
Not as like this variable. It's when you look at the logs. Yeah. When things like this are written, that's when it gets reset.
Okay.
Okay. But you have basically the current and the total. So for many tools, you would want the total and say that it's a running number. And most tools will then compute, like every time it polls, it'll look at how long it took between polling intervals,
right,
and it can compute what the rate is. So for various purposes, we wanted the current and the running total, and you've got both available. Yeah, so there's a lot of information here. Okay, now one thing that I have wanted to do, but it's not as easy as you would expect, is expose all this via SNMP as well. You would expect that there'd just be library to like expose everything via SNMP, but things like that are harder than you expect.
Mm-hmm. And probably the audience isn't that huge either. Because the at a high level, like some of the activity that's occurring in the Heimdall Proxy environment, you could set alerts at, like in CloudWatch on some of those metrics.
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice to just be able to expose everything and like allow you to configure what will be shown in CloudWatch. That may be something that we add in a later date, where basically you can select your JMX value and say, as part of the configuration of CloudWatch, say export this to CloudWatch. That way you can pick whichever variables you want. The problem with trying to export everything is that you get charged for it.
Correct.
It is a powerful enough interface that it gives us a lot of options for debugging if things get weird.
Right. Okay.
That's why I wanted to show this to you. Even things like this. Okay. This tells you what tables are invalidated and when their last invalidation time is.
Oh, that's interesting. And that's a Unix epoch there.
Yeah.
Huh.
So you can actually see which tables have been updated.
Right. And if you were tracking that or monitoring that, you could determine which tables were highly updated.
Correct.
Okay. Interesting.